This is Truth Be Told.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Truth Be Told. We're so excited you're joining us. We're going to jump right into today's episode, and we're going to be talking about disappointment. Now, before you tune out, I want you to just try to tune in because there's going to be lots of encouragement here for you today. But I just wanted to chat with you ladies, and I was hoping you could maybe share a moment when you dealt with disappointment, whether it was in your career or with relationships or loss.
Like for me, I struggle a lot with setting lofty expectations on myself and for my future. So I'm a huge dreamer and I have these ideas and I expect my life to look like a certain way by a certain age. And it's been something I'm struggling with right now, just hitting another year in my life and all these milestones. It's kind of like, it's not going as I expected. And so I really struggled with this disappointment because it wasn't how I wanted it to turn out. It's been better in so many ways, but I'm really learning, I don't have a solid set career. And so dealing with that aspect and being like, okay, I don't have all my ducks in a row, and I thought I would by 29, and I'm like, oh, I don't. And I feel like I'm still in that place of trying to move forward, and I think it's just letting go of expectations on myself, and I'm like, oh, by the time I'm 29, I'm gonna have all this stuff and I'm gonna feel this way, my life's gonna be this huge success. And then I'm like, it's definitely different and I'm very thankful it is, but it's still being nicer to myself and letting go of that expectation and disappointment and that self-condemning mind game I play with myself. So.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. When I turned 30, I remember that was a big year for me because I always wanted to be on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. And I say always, but that's not actually true. But when I was 15, I learned that it was a real thing. I was like, so when on my 30th birthday, my husband he had someone on our team. I have a design studio. He had someone on our team make me a Forbes cover.
Well done, Travis.
Well done, babe. But I mean, it really was still just it's still a reminder. Oh, I didn't do that, and I never will do that. But I absolutely relate. I think for me, most of the disappointment in my life has been just being overly optimistic or going out on a limb and trying things and then not having them be well received or even understood or just successful or this is what I'm known for. I feel like I'm still figuring that out. What's my brand? But I don't know.
Oh my God, you're doing great. Well, it's comforting too because a lot of times it's easy to kind of see everyone else in this light and being like, oh, well, you have a company and all these things align. They look like they align, but I haven't seen the behind the scenes and stopping that comparison game is I think a huge thing. So.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest one. I feel like a broken record when I talk about disappointment, the things I'm disappointed in right now, but it's totally in line with what you guys are saying too. I'm 29 and I thought my life would look totally different by now.
Oh, no, it's okay.
But, when it's I have a great life, but just certain things that you thought you would have by 29 or certain things that you desire right now, it is disappointing when you wake up and you're like, I don't know when that's gonna happen. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I feel like I'm emotional all the time.
No, it's okay. Well, because you want to know what it is. It's I can totally relate. It's okay, when you're kind of casting a vision for your life. You're just kind of okay, well, I'm just throwing it out there, and it takes a lot of courage and I think vulnerability to just say, hey, this is what I want and I'm putting it out there. Do you know what I mean? Especially when you're sharing it with people and now it's oh my gosh, now people know what's in my heart or what I desire, and now it's when it doesn't actually manifest when you've actually put it out there, sometimes it could be oh my gosh, now are people gonna look at me and be disappointed with me? And then there's all these other things that come with it. But I don't know, I feel anytime I've said that I wanted to do something and it actually didn't happen, I realized I actually didn't want that thing or need that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or it wasn't the right timing for me to have it. And then when it actually happened, it was like, oh my goodness, had I gotten this thing that I thought that I wanted, that I was so disappointed about in that moment, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do the right thing with it, you know? So I don't know, like, it's a hard thing when you're going through it, but I feel like there's always hope for it. Because until you're like dead and gone, you know, and you're alive and beating, like, there's hope for whatever it is that you're dreaming about or that you want. Maybe it's like Forbes 40 under 40, you know what I mean? Or like, I don't know, like, maybe it's a different age bracket, but it's not that it won't happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's still always that potential that could very well happen.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, I relate to, like, that feeling too, but a lot of times it's just perpetuated by, and I think you brought this up too, like, it's perpetuated by it being in my face, and not comparing myself to other people is really difficult, especially when it's like a day-to-day thing. Like, everyone else I talk to, it feels like every day, or like these entrepreneurs who are killing it, you know what I mean? Or people, or you know, and so I'm like, oh,
you are killing it. You are so killing it.
Thanks, guys.
But it's like so important to be around people like who like are entrepreneurs and killing it, so you can feel like inspired by them and give you hope, where it's like, oh, if it can happen for this person, it can happen for me, and I can learn from this person. Like, I love being around married people because, like, I hope to be married one day, so I'm like, I want to learn and just like be around family, so it's like, but then comparison can like so easily seep in, where it's like in your face every day. So people have this and that, where it's just like an everyday battle, I feel it, and some days it's stronger than other days, for sure.
And I think sometimes though, with stuff like marriage and entrepreneurship, a lot of times it feels like, oh, this person did X, Y, and Z right, and so they got the reward. Where sometimes it's like what you said, it's just timing. Yeah. And that's the hardest part, I think, with disappointment, is being like not putting it on yourself. Like, I messed up. So,
Yeah, and it's true. And it's funny that you say that, because, like, you're like, okay, you're looking at someone's life and you're saying, okay, I see them killing it, I see that. But we don't see the come up. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? We don't see the moments when they're sitting there and being like, yep, I had that disappointment. Yep, I experienced that. Yep, I was sad. Yep, I felt like I'm never going to make it. And sometimes we just see the happy ending, but we don't see the come up. Yeah. And so I think it's so important even for us to remind ourselves of the perspective of like, maybe we're seeing a glimmer of where we're going to be, but we also can't negate the fact that it didn't come easy for those people.
No, it's always a process.
It is.
Yeah. Like, one of my favorite things is reading people's success stories, especially when their success was like later in life and they had like a harsh upbringing, or like it was a struggle financially for them. Like, that's always my favorite thing, because it's inspiring, and it's so important to surround yourself by people who inspire you. And so, like, one is like Colonel Sanders from KFC. I don't like his chicken.
This isn't sponsored.
I like Raising Cane's, but
also not sponsored.
But preferred. But he didn't have his breakthrough until he was in his 60s. And it's like crazy, because you see this huge legacy that he's created in the fast food world. And like, you see this and you think that it was just something easy, or he had the money to like put into it. And he had like hardship after hardship after hardship, but we don't see those hardships. We see his success. And so we live in a society where we really just focus on the success that people have. We don't focus on their journey to success.
I love that saying when they say, like, people who are an overnight success, it took them 20 years to get to it. So it's like, we're like, you know, in the media, it's like this overnight success, and it's like, oh yeah, but I've been doing this for 10 years. So maybe that night lasted for a decade, you know, and so we just don't see the build up for it.
Yeah, it's so true. Have you guys ever dealt with disappointment in like specifically like relationships, whether it's like friendships or like romantic relationships, or and how did you navigate that or like overcome it, or was it really difficult for you?
I feel like if you've been alive for any length of time, you've experienced disappointment in relationships, right? I mean,
are you alive?
I think everyone has. Like, my 6-year-old daughter has, you know, experienced, and I think that that's just like the beauty of life, is that we just try to get better every single time and learn from, you know, our disappointments. And I for sure have had people that I feel like I've let them down, or I feel like they've let me down, and just kind of trying to walk through that disappointment. And I think I am 36, so I'm not in my 20s anymore, but I think, not that I've lived that long, but the journey that I've had this far, the thing I'm understanding more and more is like communication is such a big deal, because I often find that people who deal with disappointment are those that have unrealistic or unspoken expectations. And so instead of having like expectancy, like that something good is going to happen, we have this expectation that we have this definitive picture in mind of how things are going to turn out. And when we live our lives with expectancy as opposed to expectations, I think it creates like this fluid for things to change, and for us to be able to be a little bit more flexible as they go, instead of, no, we didn't miss that one thing that I've been dreaming all my life. But I mean, I did the same thing in my 20s. Like, I had it all figured out. I was going to be married at 24. I was going to have my first baby at 26. I was and none of that happened. I got married a little bit later on in life. And so I was like 28, and I'm like, where is my husband? And so it definitely didn't go, and I had to that was definitely a process for me, just kind of, all right, I have to learn to let this go and not hold on to this, this is my source of happiness, this expectation that I have. And then I find sometimes in relationships, I get disappointed when people don't meet my expectations. But sometimes I don't tell them what my expectations are. It's like my husband.
Read our minds.
I'm like, read between the lines. And he's like, I don't know what it says. You actually have to tell me, because I keep falling short of your expectations because you're not communicating them to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I think over the years I've just gotten better at communicating my expectations and trying to live with a sense of expectancy and not it has to look this way. So
I had a friendship that I had since I was in 4th grade all the way up until I think I was in my early 20s, and it was a disappointing moment for me when our friendship broke up, because I thought that we could grow together, and it was kind of we were at a crossroad where I wanted to step into something new, and I didn't want to do the same things I was doing before, and I kind of wanted to upgrade my life. And so I had a conversation. I wasn't just hey, I don't want to be friends anymore, right? I felt okay, well, I need to communicate to her hey, this is kind of how I want to live my life. This is the kind of things that I want to do and I want to go after. Can we still be friends kind of thing? And I just remember it was just so difficult, because she just didn't want to accept me changing and evolving and growing and maturing. And I had to write this long letter of just hey, I love you, but unfortunately, you're not accepting who I want to be when I become and championing that, and I have to go my separate ways because I don't want to get dragged down, know? And that was a huge disappointment for me, because being friends with someone since you're in 4th grade, there's so many transitional things that happen in life. And I mean, of course, you don't think of a friendship and you think, okay, an end to it. You obviously want them to be a part of your life. But I knew I had to make a definitive choice in that moment, because I felt like she was the kind of person that if I kept being around, it would be kind of criticizing and trying to draw me into bad decisions. And so it was very difficult. I remember I cried for probably a good week or so, because it was just very, very sad for me. But it ended up being the best decision of my life. And she actually reached out to me recently on social media. That's amazing. And we're just kind of stirring up a conversation again. And I'm in a different perspective and a different place in life. So I feel also, too, I feel a lot more confident and stronger to be an influence as opposed to be influenced. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying with going through a breakup with a friend, because that's something I never really went through. I remember in a previous episode, I was I kind of just friendships have just kind of grown apart.
Yeah.
And so I went through that kind of recently, and I was shocked, because I thought as you age, people mature too, and you're kind of moving forward and everything. And so it was a really big slap in the face to realize that sometimes people don't want reconciliation or communication. And like, if they're gonna, like, it's kind of like I had to realize, like, what was I willing to settle for in terms of, like, how I was being treated. And, like, so I ended up being walked over and completely ignored. And I was like, okay, well, like, let's life assess this. If this was any of my other friends, would I say, like, keep that in your life? And I would definitely say no. Like, I had to come to terms with, like, realizing that I needed to let go, because if someone, like, kind of like the situation and the negativity of the situation was so heavy on my heart, and the person didn't make any effort to, like, figure it out. So I was like, okay, like, let's reassess. What am I willing to settle for? Yeah. And I kind of just had to be like, okay, let's rip the Band-Aid off. And, like, it's not about growing apart. It was, like, being torn apart because of the situation. And, like, I had to be okay. And I spent a week crying about it. And, like, my poor husband just heard me verbally process every single step of it. And he was like, he even reminded me, he's like, you don't have to settle for friendships because you value the person. And he's like, he's really good at, like, reminding me, like, what I deserve and what I should settle for. And so it was kind of, like, disappointing, because I didn't think that's something I would have to go through, especially with someone I considered as, like, a close friendship, and then realizing it's not what it is. And it was kind of like, there was a good friendship, but then at the end of it, it was like, maybe it was all a facade. Maybe it wasn't as deep as I thought it was. And so then it was, like, just learning to be okay with it and just be like, do you know what? Some people suck. Sometimes the situation sucks. And that's okay. It doesn't reflect on my value as a person. It just reflects that that relationship wasn't one for life. And it wasn't one I should keep around.
Yeah. I feel like one of my greatest lessons is, like, hurt people hurt people. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because, like, before I was married, like, years and years ago, I was dating someone, and we were together for, like, gosh, like, it was close to a year, I think, and he ended up cheating on me, and I was just like,
ouch.
I'm gonna kill you. But I mean, in that moment, it was, like, devastating. Obviously, like, you're heartbroken, and I mean, you feel like your world is, like, caving in on itself. The amount of emotions that happen in that, like, in that moment when your whole life kind of feels like it gets torn apart or turned upside down. And I mean, I don't think there's ever any way around disappointment. That I just feel like you get wiser and gain better tools to get through disappointment a little bit less scarred.
Like, I walked through something just similar with, like, cheating in a relationship, but even it kind of relates to what I was thinking about when we were talking about friendships and all of that, where, like, a lot of times the disappointment I have when relationships change, it's not just, like, the end of the relationship. It's normally, like, the relationships change because I realize that person doesn't value me or doesn't respect me in the way that I'm like, wait, do I give off some sort of, like, vibe that I'm not respectable? Like, what? I know, like, that you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not worth respecting, or you look down on me or something. You know, and I don't know if that's proud or what, or just, like, I have self-worth, maybe. But with, you know, that kind of thing, like being cheated on, or even just, you know, in my life and relationships, it's like I grow all the time, you know, and like, sometimes we grow in opposite directions, and I'm like, oh wow, they see me as this person I used to be, and I'm just not her anymore. And, like, bless her, like, I was younger, I've learned lessons, and now I'm advancing, and they still see me as that person. They're not even acknowledging the growth. And so, you know, sometimes it's just time to be like, okay, well, I'm going over here. But the tools, I think, with dealing with that kind of disappointment are really just having self-awareness and self-value. Like, okay, well, I know where I'm going. Like, even if this person doesn't see it, and if this person doesn't see it right now, or if they never will, like, I know what I'm worth, and I know where I'm going.
Yeah. It's like you can only really fix yourself.
Yeah.
You know, exactly. You can only work on getting better. You can never control anyone. And so you're never going to be able to control if you get disappointed or not. But you do have control over yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that, because we can get better at that. Always. You know.
That, like, well, like, that, you know, you're only responsible for you. Like, I heard that someone say that. It might have been you, but like, maybe it was another. They told episode. But yeah, just the idea of like, oh, well, I can't change what other people do, but I'm only responsible for me.
And that's encouraging.
Yeah, it is.
Because you can, like I said, you can always do better. And if you want to grow, you can always grow.
Yeah.
And you can always get better tools. So even though you're going to continually get disappointment, I mean, you grow as a person to be able to get through it better because you're able to control you know?
Yeah.
But, I mean, it still sucks.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, no matter which way you slice it,
Yeah,
no matter how mature you've gotten, no matter, like, when someone disappoints you, or a situation, like, it sucks. Like, there's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
It
I
just
think
does.
along with that, I think that something I want to touch on too is when I disappoint people, like, it sucks when you disappoint people. And I feel like that's something that's been more gripping in my life, like the disappointment that I've caused on people, because especially in relationships where it's like, oh wow, I really let this person down, and like we can't live in that what if state of life, but it's like, oh, if I hadn't have done that, or if I had have just communicated better, or even me valuing somebody like better, like our relationship wouldn't be like where it is now, you know? And so I think that like disappointment in yourself is like something for me that has been, I feel like I'm a lot better at it now, but especially in my earlier 20s when you're just like figuring so much out, it's like, oh, I have to have so much grace for myself. And I like to like learn or recognize that these are moments where I can grow. These are moments where like I get to choose like who I want to be, and like the next step is then like who do I want to be going forward. Apologize, and then it's like then once you apologize, it's like then in their hands to accept it or not. But yeah, I just feel like it's like an important thing to bring up too, like just like if we've been like if anyone is alive, like I'm sure again we've disappointed people too, you know. So it's like oh, how do you navigate that? You know.
And it's true, like I love what you were saying, because I was thinking the same thing about a disappointment as an opportunity for either parties to grow, right? And it's like, you know, it sucks to disappoint people, and it sucks to be disappointed, but like you were saying earlier, Renee, it's inevitable. And I think the interesting thing about disappointment is I feel like it makes successful things or things that are good feel even better.
You
and
know,
it can make
like,
relationships even stronger.
You know?
Exactly. If it's like two healthy people reconciling.
Right. Because then there's kind of a little bit more of a stake in the ground where you're participating in what actually is happening in your life, right? Like if everything was just always so amazing all the time, you wouldn't necessarily have a value for what it looks like to have healthy relationships or have great career opportunities, right? And so I think it helps to humble you and like creates just better value for when things do happen.
I think
like I think people like also when they look at other relationships, if they're like, I know a couple people where they know people and there's like no conflict in their marriage because one person constantly rolls over and lets the other person run around, and I'm like, but they're avoiding, like, even though conflict is scary and having hard conversations can be really sucky, I would much rather have friendships go deeper because we've had those conversations instead of it being this surface level, like, kind of friendship where, like, we just don't talk about, like, what the other person did to bother us or hurt us, and, like, avoiding that authenticity and that vulnerability that, like, only real relationships can grow in.
Have you guys ever seen those YouTube videos of people who put they're colorblind and then they put glasses on that lets them see color?
No.
Oh yeah.
I pull my eyes out.
And it's always like older dudes that are like look like lumberjacks, and then they're like crying. It's amazing.
I love that.
It's like that though, like, right? Living, like, if your relationship never goes, like, living in the black and white, like, unless you experience pain, you never truly know what beauty is, you know? And it's like I always am reminded of that. It's like, so you can live a monotone life and never really, like, experience it if you don't choose to, but, like, then when you put those glasses, it's just so much sweeter and so much richer when you take the time to, you know, invest and have hard conversations and hold on when you really don't want to hold on.
It's true. Yeah. You have to let go, because disappointment can be literally like bondage. Like, it literally, you can be imprisoned in disappointment, you know, especially when you're going through like really difficult circumstances where you feel overwhelmed or you feel like you don't know the way out, or maybe you don't feel like you have a support system. But the worst thing you can do is allow that to imprison you. And the best thing that you can do is be honest with yourself and how you're feeling. Like, really just embrace. If you have to go through a process of grieving, like, allow yourself to grieve whatever loss it is.
Feel the feels.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're living in a day and age where mental health is a real problem for people. It's like I think, oh my gosh, I feel like I could go on this tangent, like I can be like a grandma, about disconnection. You know, it's like we have to stay connected to how we're feeling. We have to stay connected with people, have people in our lives so that we can actually process the emotions that go with it. And it's okay. Like, it's okay to feel disappointment. Like, it's okay to feel disappointment. It's okay to be sad and grieve through that, but don't live in that place. Like, don't live in that place.
I feel like you could even speak to, like, the disappointment of losing someone. Because you have, probably on a more profound level than any of us.
I lost my brother when I was 16 years old in a very horrific car accident with 4 other friends, and 2 of them were childhood friends of ours, so it was like losing 3 people at once, and it really hit our town, like, really, really hard, because they were just so loved in our community, and it hit us really hard as a family. You know, in the same, you know, kind of time frame, I lost my father too, not in death, but he actually cheated on my mom, and so it really broke our family. So I lost my brother, and then I lost my dad, and so it was a huge disappointment in my life, and I had a lot of questions. And I think the best thing for me was surrounding myself with people that would listen, that had compassion, that had understanding, and just a safe place where I could just, you know, if I wanted to scream, I could scream. If I wanted to yell, I could yell, and I could express how I was feeling. And I went to counseling, which counseling is great, guys. Like, go to counseling, go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with you if you need counseling or therapy. Like, do it. It is the best thing. I mean, you pretty much pay someone to listen to you talk, so it's great. But, you know, and so, I know, right? Come on. And so it was really, really helpful to get the tools that I needed to process grief. Because, you know, no one ever gives you a guidebook to how to process, and everyone processes loss very differently. And it really affected me so bad. I mean, I suffered from depression and anxiety, and it's because I was compiling it, and I wasn't going through the process. And when you don't actually deal with disappointment, other things will jump on top of it, like shame, like fear, like anxiety, like depression. And then you'll find that you're wearing all these things on you that now you have to dig and you have to uproot. So, like, that's why I'm so passionate about, like, getting help and talking to someone about it, because you'll get through it a lot sooner.
I feel like you're just, like, a walking testimony for that, though. Because, like, she genuinely, you don't walk around like a victim of disappointment. You've, like, you can't even tell unless you know her that she's, like, dealt with that level of disappointment in her life. And I think that's, like, such a testimony to the fact that you dug in deep and really healed as much as you can from those kind of situations, you know.
Of course. And, like, that's the thing. It's like, I think sometimes people think, okay, you know, when you lose someone, like, it still doesn't hurt, you know. And people out there, like, be kind, because it could be 10 years later and someone could have a moment where they're just sad, and let them feel that way and be there for them. And I think the important thing is exactly what you said, is getting as much healing as you can and walking through that process. And it can be difficult, but it's so rewarding. And had I not walked through that process of healing, I wouldn't have been able to receive love. Like, I wouldn't have been able to receive my husband, because I would have been blocked off from fear of thinking, oh my gosh, well, what if I get married and then something happens to him? Do you know what I mean? And so there's just so many other things that you don't even realize down in the long run of life that can really affect that. So I just say, go after those things. Like, go after healing, like you're saying, as quickly as possible. And, like, you're going to be okay.
I just remember this past week I was just reading in my living room like I do every single morning. There was nothing different about it. And I just, like, had this overwhelming sadness that I miss my grandma. And because her and my grandpa are probably the 2 people in my life that I was the closest to that I've actually lost in that, like, to death, you know. But I just sat there and cried, and it felt so good. Like, just because, like, I don't know, just it's been like over 10 years since she passed away, but I just had this thought of her, and I was like, I just miss her. And I just think that, like, it's so important to be okay with not being okay every moment of every day. And, like, if you have a moment where you just want to cry because you're disappointed or because you've lost someone, or whatever it is, like, it's okay to just do that. Like, you have full permission to feel what you're feeling in a moment. I mean, you don't have full permission for your emotions to rule your life, but you have full permission to feel them and to, you know, acknowledge them and really honor them. So,
that's so good. This doesn't have to do with loss. So,
Switching subject.
Kind of back to like losing friendships growing apart or relationships growing apart. I just remember for a long, like, I was in a very on again, off again relationship for a very long time. And so it was a lot of ups and downs of disappointment, excited. And I always, like, my mindset was always like, oh, he's winning and I'm losing. And something that was really revolutionary for me was, like, I don't know if I read it or someone told me, but in a relationship, like, there's no winner or, like, if a relationship ends, like, everyone loses. Because like, that was so healing for me too, where it's like, oh, like, this guy that I thought X, Y, and Z would happen with, like, I had an impact on his life too, and I would just sit there, like, after we would, like, break up again and again and again, and be like, did I mean nothing to him? You know, it's like, you just, like, go through, like, your own narrative in your head, and it's like, oh, no, like, I actually had an impact on his life, but, like, now, like, my right to know that is over. But I can, like, rest in the fact that, like, he didn't win. Like, he thought it was going to go a certain, like, maybe not the exact same way I did, but, like, you know, like, he had expectations too, or hopes or whatever. And same with friendships. Like, when they end or when they fizzle apart, like, I think that, like, we think we're the only ones hurting and grieving because the relationship is no longer, so we don't get to see or hear like, how they're doing anymore. So you can write this out, your own narrative. And so I just think it's important to know, like, no one's winning, you know, when
The thing I keep hearing over and over again is that there's a difference between expectation and hope. Because I feel like anytime I've set expectations on someone or a relationship or even myself, it was because I had pride behind it and, like, I deserve this, not in, like, a good way, but in a, like, I need to be better than everyone else or anything else happening. And, like, I feel like hope is just, it's like a deep rooted, like, no matter what, like, I have hope that, like, I am, like, a successful person. I have hope that, like, I will have my dreams come true. And I have, like, I feel like people are afraid to have that hope. And they're like, well, I'll just settle for whatever's dealt to me. And then they sit back and let go of everything that they want, because they don't want to be disappointed. And so I feel like people, like, it's okay to have hope. It's okay to, like, put yourself out there. It's okay to feel disappointment too. And I think that was the one thing, is I had to give myself permission to have hope and potentially be disappointed. But, like, my hope isn't rooted in the situation. It's in, like, my identity. And, like, that's gonna be there regardless of, like, how the situation plays out. Like, oh, this career opportunity didn't work, okay, let's move on. Like, that no will lead to my yes, and who knows where I'll be. Or, like, that relationship didn't work out and it's ended crappily, or like, that boyfriend I thought, like, you'd be with, I'd be with,
now, like, you're married to an amazing man.
Now I'm married to this amazing man who believes in me more than I believe in myself so often. Like, even though, like, looking back, I'm like, yeah, like, I was disappointed. Like, I always, like, luckily I had hope that there's something greater and better for me. And, like, just because you feel disappointment doesn't mean you or your relationships were a failure. It just means it wasn't for you, and that's okay.
There's this thing, I know Brene Brown talks about it in, oh man, what is the book?
Sounds
one
like
of her books. Sounds like daring a thing. It's not daring. Oh, The Gifts of Imperfection. So in that book, she talks about, you know, how parents sometimes will, like, you know, when they're tucking their kids in for sleep, for bed. Wow, I don't know. I can't get a sentence on. For night time. For, like, the night time. But they'll be, like, staring at them, being like, oh, I love you so much. And then in an instant have the exact thought that's like, oh, man, what if you get ripped away from me? They have that fear.
Oh, I have that.
And it's called foreboding joy. And basically it's like, you know, foreboding joy is like, oh, well, if I hope too much, if I think, like, if I have this moment of overwhelming love and affection and joy in my life, like, the fear is greater that things are going to be stolen from me, or like so you actually might prevent yourself from having it. So like, say you're disappointed, you're like, well, I'm just not gonna feel that. I'm not gonna let myself get there anymore. Because you're like, well, it's gonna, the other shoe's gonna drop, right? And so what we're saying is like, and Brene Brown backs us up with her research, is that having that hope and letting yourself actually feel that joy does not take away from the pain if it actually does get ripped away from you. It really doesn't. And so like, to live with your heart forward, open and hopeful and ready to receive good things. It's like the way, ultimately, like, feel sad, get through the disappointment, excuse me. But, just know that there is hope on the other side, and leading and loving and living that way is ultimately the way to go. Get back in the game. Get back in the game. Well, we'd love to hear from you and your thoughts on how you've overcome disappointment. Even if, if you want to just share like what you're going through right now, we'd love to rally around you. And like, we are here to have conversations. So we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you like this video, please like it, and definitely subscribe to know about future episodes of Truth Be Told. And we'd love to see you on Instagram. Oh, we also have our giveaway. We're going to be announcing a next episode, so you have to tune in. So to get the information for that, definitely check out a couple episodes back where we share all about our giveaway with Second Kind Beauty. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.